So I checked out one of the latest videos from the wonderful McDojo life, Rob and McDojo life, and we're back to our old friend the Dim Mac, the Death Touch. As taught, I've seen this bloke before. It's in America, and I think this guy's one of George Dillman's mob, I think. And he talks like he needs a good dose of nasal decongestants. He was previously in a video, him and one of his adult students, who was this sort of very young woman or girl in her late teens, black belt obviously, and they were throwing energy bolts across the room at each other. But now he's teaching the Dim Mac, the Chinese Death Touch. And right, so first of all, like straight away in the report, we've got our old friend, which is the 10-year-old black belt. Right, and they've got that thing, I think in Taekwondo, where you get the edge on your gi. You get the sort of black trim on the lapel, going down the lapels. But children shouldn't have black belts. There shouldn't be a junior black belt grade, in my humble opinion. It's a form of child cruelty, I think, if that doesn't sound a bit over the top. A child is not equipped mentally to handle the concept of being a black belt. It gives them entirely false expectation of what they can do, especially as it's usually a McDojo trait to have child black belts. So as long as mummy and daddy pay the big bucks to the inevitably pot-bellied teacher, then their child gets flattered and told that they're a badass, and they've got to be really careful not to use their special powers as they get given their black belt and stuff. So it's quite possible they could get into a dangerous situation, because they have entirely false expectation of what they can do. I mean, it's equally as applicable to adults. Well, not equally, but it's definitely applicable to adults, but definitely so to children. When I did judo, I was 6 or 7 in the early 80s, 82, 83. We used to get like mons in between the belts. So like you'd eventually get white belt, and then 1 yellow mon, 2 yellow mons, 3 yellow mons, then you get yellow belt, and then orange mons on that, and so on. And I think the grading was every 6 months, so there was you never even entertained the possibility of getting a black belt. It was some mystical far thing that a black belt was what your teacher wore. Where Mr. Glass, who was famous judoka, and he was a black belt, and that was a black belt. I mean, obviously a black belt now generally carries nothing like the weight it did, say, in the 70s or 80s, especially now with the rise of the McDojos and that. And I've said now, in Japan, a black belt seems far, even in sports, so like in England, in my experience, something like judo or jiu-jitsu, a black belt still does mean something. Whereas in Japan, they sort of seem to give black belts, you can get one like judo after 2 years, say, even slightly less. And it basically means you've got a few movements, basic movements like Ippon Seanagi, Kesugatami, all that sort of thing. You've got them down in your muscle memory. And equally, there's a lot of etiquette to learn. So I got my brown belt through doing 2 hours of just knowing how to step on the mat, bow on that, and then I was just used as a practice dummy by a 4th dan. I was really quite ill after it, actually. So that was weird. That was like a black belt test to get a brown belt, and then they said, okay, you're ready for the black belt test. And I said before, it all sounds like bull, but I bust one leg and then I bust another. Then I got gastroenteritis, and this was every time before I was due to take a black belt test. Anyway, that's my little sob story as well. I never got a black belt. Always stayed a brown belt, which I'm quite happy with, actually, because I don't really go to judo anymore. Well, I don't go to judo anymore. But I always like being a brown belt, because it sort of looked like you knew what you were doing, but if you landed on your arse, it was all right. It looks a lot worse if you're a black belt. Anyway, that's kind of by the by. Yeah. So yeah, child black belts, it gives them a bad preconception about what they can do, because they will be flattered and told that they've got all these magical powers. And then comparing to that, back to this Dim Mac nonsense. So this guy, the bloke who talks stuffy nose, this time he wasn't talking about throwing energy bolts, he was talking about the Dim Mac, you touch someone. And they're interviewing this kid, the black belt, the 10-year-old kid. He's like, oh, it's really cool, you can stab someone's heart. What a thing to teach to a child. A, it doesn't work. B, martial arts is like as soon as possible, this idea that it turns you some sort of badass or something should be drummed out of them gently. But it's just about yourself, about self-improvement. You get stronger and perhaps a bit bigger and faster or whatever, but it helps you develop as a person, all that sort of wonderful stuff. Not that you tell a 10-year-old that you can stop someone's heart by touching their pressure point in a certain way or something. And just absolute nonsense. How this even legally allowed to be taught that without a dojo being shut down, I do not know. But yeah, so junior black belts and McDojos, just avoid all the time. And if you see them, call them out, because you're actually helping the kids there at the end of the day.